A 10-year-old boy tells a physicist his book is too hard. The physicist asks him one question. Do you want to know how to change your mother's future? What the boy learns sounds impossible. The future isn't waiting for you. It's bending around what you're thinking right now. And there's a version of you moving faster than thought, testing futures before you step into them, sending signals your conscious mind barely notices. You've felt those signals. That gut pull that stops you mid-step, that dream that feels like a warning, that sudden knowing you can't explain. This book claims those moments aren't random. They're your future self trying to guide you. By the end of this video, you'll know how to recognize those signals, stop drinking futures that aren't yours, and align with the path your body already senses. But first, you need to forget what you think you know. Let's go.
This is an artificially aware original production.
The book is called The Double, How Does It Work by Lucile and Jean-Pierre Garnier Malet, and what makes it strange is how it starts. There's no easing in. The authors drop you into that exact moment, a child demanding to know how to change his mother's future, as if that's a perfectly normal question to ask before breakfast. There's no academic distance. It's all urgency and the raw need to fix something that feels unfixable. The child wants a manual for life, the kind people search for when nothing makes sense. And the book's first instruction, forget what you think you know. Not wipe your memory clean, but loosen the grip you have on your habits, beliefs, and explanations. People carry old ideas around like heirlooms and defend them long after they stop being useful. The child doesn't like this at all. He calls it silly. He wants to know how to forget a belief without forgetting everything else, which is a fair question. But forgetting here means loosening your certainty long enough to consider another way time might behave. It's like turning off a lamp in a bright room so you can finally see what's glowing in the dark. And what the boy sees next changes everything. This whole scene works as a parable about beginner's mind. The child asks questions that cut straight through the author's mystical tone. He wants clarity, not poetry. Adults guard their assumptions like private property. Children bulldoze them. Hidden inside the conversation is a radical claim. Your future doesn't wait for you to arrive. It bends around the stories you already believe. If you're convinced life is hostile, you move through the world noticing only threats. Assume you always fail and your mind filters out anything that contradicts it. The authors argue that this rigidity shapes the range of futures you can access. When you cling to one model of reality, you stop noticing the exits right beside you. I'll be honest, telling you to forget what you know is a double-edged move. It can open your mind, but it can also steer you straight into pseudoscience if you stop questioning. This book walks that line boldly. It asks you to loosen your assumptions about time so it can offer a different architecture for reality. But loosening assumptions isn't the same as dropping skepticism. You can explore new possibilities while still holding on to logic. The future isn't a blank waiting room. It's a shape that reacts to the way you think right now. The child wants a simple answer, and the author wants him to loosen his certainty first. That tension is the hinge of everything that follows. The boy comes at the author with a strangely adult frustration. He says his mother feels small because she isn't a scientist, and he repeats it with the blunt honesty only a child can get away with. People turn complicated ideas into private clubs and assume everyone outside them is lost. Understanding time isn't reserved for scholars, the book insists. The idea is meant for anyone who has ever been afraid of their own future. A person can sense a loved one's mood before a single word is spoken, and no degree makes that possible. The child pushes back because he spots the contradiction immediately. If it's truly accessible, why does his mother still feel overwhelmed? The moment the boy starts crying, the theory stops being theory. He wants to stop being the weight his mother carries. He wants rules he can follow so he can fix something he doesn't understand. His emotion gives the chapter its force because it turns an abstract idea into a personal demand. Real understanding has nothing to do with academic knowledge. It's closer to noticing a pattern you've lived without ever naming it. Someone who has made it through a breakup understands time's emotional distortions better than a person who has memorized equations about space-time. Knowledge and understanding aren't the same currency. You don't need to know how a car engine works to feel the pull of acceleration. The book tries to collapse the distance between emotional intuition and theoretical insight by claiming that people already live inside the model they're trying to learn. The catch is that no one told them they were doing it. The tension between simplicity and complexity runs through this chapter. Simple ideas turn complicated when they brush up against fear, especially the fear of misunderstanding something important. When you treat intelligence as a race to grasp an idea instantly, confusion feels like a judgment instead of a normal stage in learning. Many people carry an invisible insecurity around knowledge. You pretend it's about the difficulty of the subject, but most of the time it's the fear of looking foolish. The boy's mother is caught in that trap. She thinks she's unqualified to understand time because she isn't a scholar. But understanding the future isn't about mastering formulas. It's about noticing how your own reactions shape the possibilities you move toward. Anyone who has lived through uncertainty has already studied time more deeply than they realize. Curiosity carries you further than expertise when you face unfamiliar concepts. The child's frustration shows the emotional toll of believing you must be intelligent in a specific way to understand the world. Understanding waits in the space where fear finally loosens its grip. And with that, the story shifts toward how this strange concept of doubling is supposed to function in the first place. Time doesn't flow at a single speed. Movement changes how fast you age, which is true whether you like it or not. A plane passenger ages differently than someone standing still, even if the difference is tiny. Atomic clock experiments have shown this, but most people never think about it because the effect feels too small to matter. Still, the fact that time stretches and contracts opens a strange door. If two people can live different amounts of time while doing the same thing, what else is happening behind the scenes of your daily life? The boy imagines climbing into a rocket and coming back centuries later while still a child. That scenario makes sense within physics, because extreme acceleration slows aging. But the moment he thinks about returning to find his girlfriend old or gone, the idea shifts from scientific curiosity to emotional crisis. People measure time through relationships more than clocks. Time stretches and compresses in your mind long before physics gets involved. This is where the author makes his leap. He uses the elasticity of physical time to justify the existence of a second version of you. Your double lives in a place where time moves much faster, giving that version the chance to study your future before you live it. It's like someone reading ahead in a book while you're still on the current page. The problem is that the book blends real physics with speculation. Time dilation is real. A personal guide living in a faster time stream is not. People often treat scientific language as a bridge to mystical meaning, using one to decorate the other. The book walks this line without any shame. The child doesn't care about scientific accuracy. He cares about control. He wants to know how to guide his future instead of being dragged by it. People build stories about fate, destiny, or parallel versions of themselves because the randomness of reality is frightening. A belief in your double becomes a way to steady that fear. The author claims you don't see your future because you don't move through time at the same speed in every dimension. Your double can explore multiple possibilities while you stay anchored in your slow-moving life. It's like having someone run ahead on a trail to warn you about branches and slopes. Whether or not you accept his cosmology, the metaphor still works. People often make their best decisions by imagining who they might become, a mental version of sending out a scout. The boy becomes excited, then upset, because he realizes time is not a stable floor. It's a moving walkway that doesn't carry everyone at the same pace. That mix of wonder and dread shows up whenever someone learns something that shifts their entire worldview. The moment you see how fragile your timelines are, the ground tilts a little. Time dilation becomes a doorway, and the double becomes the inhabitant of the other side. The idea sits halfway between physics and myth, and that combination makes it stick in the mind. People like stories that explain their choices and their consequences in the same breath. This one gives you a companion in the shadows of time, someone to help you handle futures before they arrive. The book treats dreams not as stories, but as meeting points between you and your double. It claims the way you fall asleep determines how clearly you receive that guidance. A chaotic day can spill into your dreams and turn small stresses into strange nocturnal scenes, and imagining those scenes as messages from a version of you that sees farther ahead shifts the emotional weight of sleep. It stops feeling like passive rest and starts feeling like active communication. Babies have no trouble with this because they haven't learned to overthink yet. They fall asleep the moment their body decides to rest. Adults lose that ease by filling their minds with tension and commentary. When you lie awake replaying conversations or worrying about tomorrow, you build a wall around the very part of yourself that's supposed to help you untangle those worries. Dreams stretch time in a way that feels confusing, even when it's familiar. You can experience what seems like a long journey in the seconds before your alarm goes off. Scientists have measured this effect, and the gap between subjective and objective time is real. The author uses that gap to argue that dreams pull you into another timescale entirely. Your double operates in that faster lane, scanning future possibilities while you drift through a landscape made of memory and anticipation. The boy wants to know how to fall asleep properly so he can fix his mother's problem. The author taps into that familiarity and suggests you can steer this hidden world if you calm your mind before drifting off. The chapter blends what dreams genuinely do with what the author believes they can do. In real life, dreams help your brain sort emotional clutter, rehearse dangers, and reorganize memory. In the book's universe, dreams let your double adjust your future and remove dangerous paths before you meet them. It's a leap, but it resonates with anyone who has ever woken up with sudden clarity. Across cultures, dreams have always been treated as messages. The book leans into that universal impulse and gives it structure by claiming a second you is behind the curtain. Whether you believe in doubles or not, the emotional appeal is clear. It lets you imagine that your dreaming mind isn't chaotic at all, but curating your next steps. The idea that your state of mind before sleep shapes your inner world is something you already live. Going to bed angry can twist your dreams into restless spirals. Falling asleep with a calm intention can soften the edges of the next morning. The author builds a cosmic architecture around that everyday truth. He turns your nightly descent into a meeting with the part of you that sees farther ahead than your waking mind ever can. Moving quickly makes you age more slowly, a truth hiding in plain sight in your physics. When objects travel fast enough, their time dilates, and their clock ticks slower than the clock of someone standing still. Pilots and astronauts experience this on a microscopic scale every day. The boy hears this and imagines racing through space with his watch barely moving. It's the kind of idea that lights up a child's mind because it feels like a cheat code built into reality. The boy immediately takes the physics personally. He wonders what would happen to the people he cares about if he left Earth and returned years later while barely aging. That's when the idea turns from curiosity into dread. You don't fear aging as much as you fear aging apart from someone you love. The author takes the physics and stretches it in another direction. Moving through space doesn't just stretch time, it changes your relationship to the future itself. In his view, motion creates openings where your double can work more effectively because time is no longer packed tightly around you. Physical motion always affects inner life. A long walk can shake something loose inside you. A trip to a new place can reset your sense of who you are. Stagnation speeds up your decay because nothing interrupts the loops inside your mind. Movement slows that decay because it knocks you into new patterns. Even small shifts, a different street, a different routine, can open the window a bit. The child keeps circling back to watches. He wants to know exactly how slow time becomes on a rocket, as if calculating the delay will give him control. When something scares you, you try to turn it into numbers, because numbers feel safer than feelings. You don't grow old just because time passes. You grow old when the world stops changing around you. The boy is afraid of moving too fast through time, but he's also afraid of standing still. If motion can shift how you age, maybe motion isn't only physical. Maybe the way you choose, imagine, and anticipate is another form of speed. The boy announces he wants to be a cosmonaut so he can return later and study the future before living it, and the author tells him he doesn't need a rocket to do that. You already catch flashes of what's ahead in tiny moments you barely notice. You hesitate before stepping into a street because something feels off, even when nothing visible warns you. Your body stalls as if tugged by a thread from ahead. These small pauses hint at an inner mechanism scanning possibilities before you commit. These micro moments contain whole sequences of potential futures compressed into an instant. He calls them subliminal instants, the slices of time you skip over without noticing. Blink, and inside that blink, your mind may be testing several outcomes of the choice you're about to make. You feel it as intuition, a sudden tilt toward one option without knowing why. The book frames it as your double racing through possibilities at a speed you can't follow, then handing you the result. Dreams become part of this same mechanism. They operate like extended versions of those tiny flashes, giving you hours of nonlinear time in a few physical seconds. The boy wants all of this because he believes he can use it to fix his mother's problem. His urgency reveals what most people quietly want from the future: reassurance. You don't crave power over time because you want control. You crave it because you want relief from the feeling that you're walking blind. The book taps into that vulnerability by suggesting the blindness is an illusion. You can choose your future like you choose a path, as long as you pay attention to the signals that rise before you take the first step. People already run mental simulations when making choices. You picture the fallout of a text you might send or a job you might take. You feel the outcomes before committing. What the chapter really challenges is the idea that the future happens to you. It suggests you're already shaping it through every thought you entertain. A negative expectation creates one cluster of possibilities. A hopeful one creates another. You see this in self-fulfilling prophecies. Expect disaster, and you move in ways that invite it. Expect a chance, and you notice openings you would have ignored. The book pushes this logic to its edge and tells you the future bends according to the information you feed it. If you can observe futures before living them, life becomes a negotiation with time rather than a march through it. You live in the light of the past, while the future hides in darkness, because its time moves too fast to perceive. You feel this when you wake from a dream that seemed long but lasted only a breath. Your awareness can't keep up with what's happening underneath. That gap between what you experience and what unfolds inside you is where he places the work of the double. Its movement so quick and subtle that by the time your consciousness arrives, the moment is sealed as memory. Darkness triggers fear because it hides detail. When you can't see ahead, your mind invents shapes and dangers that may not exist. The author uses this instinct to explain why the future feels heavy and shadowed, even when nothing bad has happened yet. A child who fears the dark is reacting to the tension of not knowing what's ahead. Adults pretend they've outgrown that fear, but it simply evolves into anxiety about decisions, relationships, or change. In the book's universe, the double works inside that darkness, because compressed time makes everything appear shadowed from the human perspective. Try staring at a hummingbird's wings while it hovers. All you catch is a blur. The movement is real, but your perception can't register the details. Doubling works the same way. The boy listens and immediately links this darkness to his nightmares. His fear turns the theory into something emotional rather than abstract. When you feel overwhelmed or outmatched, your mind generates images that match the weight of that feeling. A nightmare becomes your brain's way of giving shape to an invisible threat. The imperceptible nature of doubling is protective. If you could see every possible future branching out in real time, you'd collapse under the overload. You already feel this when too many choices flood your mind at once. Your thoughts jitter, your chest tightens, you freeze. The book says your double filters those futures, giving you only what fits your current path. You always make decisions under uncertainty, so you fill the unknown with imagination. Sometimes that imagination takes the shape of hope. Sometimes it builds a shadow that follows you for days. The author calls that shadow darkness. A psychologist would call it anticipation. Both names point to the same reality. You navigate the future without full visibility, using instincts and emotional traces as your guide. Doubling stays hidden because its timing lies outside human perception. You move through life noticing only the results, never the invisible exchanges that shape your next steps. Doubling exists so life can explore dangerous futures without risking the physical body. He describes the double as a scout running ahead in accelerated time, testing paths before you step onto them. You do this mentally all the time. When you imagine how a conversation might go wrong before you even open your mouth, you're previewing a future. The book turns that inner simulation into a second you living in another layer of time. He connects doubling to survival. Creatures react instantly to threats because their double has already explored the danger. A deer turns its body a split second before a branch snaps. From the outside, it looks like instinct. Inside the book's logic, that instinct is the result of a future already tested. You do something similar when your hand jerks away from a hot surface before you fully register the heat. Something in you moves faster than thought. The boy hears that the double is supposed to protect you and immediately wonders why it hasn't fixed his mother's big problem. His confusion gives the chapter its emotional anchor. People expect guidance to be obvious and instantaneous. When help doesn't arrive in a clear form, you assume something is broken. But much of life is shaped by choices you didn't realize you were making, influenced by subtle pushes you can't trace. He insists the double isn't just a protector, but also an advisor and co-creator. He claims it shapes your possibilities the way a navigator charts a course on a shifting sea. You already understand this metaphor because you constantly anticipate consequences. Before agreeing to a plan, you picture how it might play out. If doubling exists to protect you, then most of its work must happen silently. You notice outcomes more than the quiet decisions that lead to those outcomes. When a disaster is avoided, you rarely feel the weight of what didn't happen. You just move on. The book turns that unnoticed absence into evidence of design, claiming the double resolves dangers before you even sense them. Interpreted more loosely, it captures something deeply human. You survive because you constantly test futures in your mind, react to hints you barely register, and adjust your steps based on invisible calculations. Whether you call that instinct, cognition, or doubling, The effect is the same. You're never moving blindly. Every thought pours information into the future, he tells the boy, and the future pours information back into you. He describes this exchange as drinking, which sounds theatrical until you remember how a single worrying idea can sour your whole body in seconds. Imagine losing a job or disappointing someone you love. Your pulse jumps and your stomach tightens, even though nothing has happened. Your body reacts as if you've already stepped into that feared timeline. That physical shift is the sensation the book frames as drinking a dangerous future. According to the book, stress arrives when you swallow futures that don't match the path you're double prepared. The idea is extreme, but the pattern is familiar. When you dwell on worst-case scenarios, you feed your nervous system something it can't digest. It's like tasting bitterness before the meal has even started. A single anxious thought can set the tone of an entire day because your mind keeps replaying an event that never happened, as if trying to force an alternate future into existence. The boy hears this and immediately links it to his nightmares. He wonders out loud if he's drinking bad futures every time he falls asleep, which is a surprisingly accurate description of how fear travels through the mind. A nightmare can latch onto a single unresolved worry and spin it into something enormous. You wake up sweating as if you just escaped danger. The metaphor sharpens. Acceptable futures feel calm because they match your natural rhythm. You know the feeling of stepping into a moment that just fits, a conversation that clicks, a decision that lands cleanly, a day where everything flows without friction. The book claims your double filters futures, so you receive the ones aligned with that balance. Stress appears when you override that filter by feeding the future with anxious projections. The book turns emotional states into a form of time navigation. It suggests you can sense whether a future is good for you based on how your body reacts to a thought. You do this unconsciously all the time. You avoid a street that feels unsafe without knowing why. You hesitate before accepting an invitation that doesn't sit right. These small signals are treated in the book as messages from the double, guiding you toward futures that won't overload your system. Rumination is a way of drinking the same toxic potential over and over until it shapes your reality. When you loop through imagined disasters, your body rehearses the tension again and again, strengthening pathways you don't actually want. By feeding dangerous futures with attention, you make them easier to update into your timeline. Falling asleep is the doorway where everything rearranges itself, he tells the boy, and the process is far simpler than adults want to believe. You know this feeling when you go to bed with your mind buzzing and wake up with a different mood, as if someone cleaned the room while you were unconscious. People treat that shift like a quirk of biology. The book treats it as cooperation between you and your double. Babies sleep perfectly because they don't question the act. Anyone who has seen a baby collapse mid-sentence into instant sleep has watched that trust in action. There's no analysis, no mental rehearsal of worries, no attempt to control the process. Adults lose that instinct. You drag your day into the night like a heavy bag, then wonder why your dreams twist into strange shapes. The state of mind before sleep determines how clearly the double can reach you. If you fall asleep while replaying stress, your dreams echo that tension. But when you fall asleep with a simple intention, like releasing something or softening your breath, the next morning usually feels lighter. The book frames this pattern as the double clearing and sorting the futures you'll need. The boy gets frustrated because the author keeps explaining elaborate ideas and then claims the solution is easy. When life feels complicated, you expect solutions that match the complexity. So when someone says the answer might be simple, it feels like an insult to your struggle. The chapter plays with that tension by insisting that adults complicate what their bodies already know how to do. Surrender to the night so something wiser inside them can work. You don't need to understand the full mechanics to benefit from them. Sleep works beneath awareness. The book adds a layer by saying that intelligence comes from a second you, operating on timelines you can't perceive. Sleep is the main moment when your double updates your path. Whether or not you take that literally, you do wake up with new clarity after wrestling with decisions. A problem that felt impossible at midnight can look ordinary at sunrise. You call it getting perspective. The book calls it receiving the future that matches your balance. Both descriptions circle the same truth. Sleep resets your relationship to what comes next. Falling asleep is not just the end of the day. It's the moment you hand your life over to the part of you that moves faster, sees farther, and doesn't get tangled in fear. Success comes when you stop trying to understand everything, he tells the boy, which sounds reckless until you look at how you operate at your best. In the middle of a good conversation, you're not analyzing each word before you speak. You respond, adjust, and move with an inner current that feels effortless. That's the rhythm the book cares about. It claims your double nudges you along that current, and when you try to control every detail, you cut yourself off from that flow. You confuse understanding with safety. You try to map every possibility so nothing can surprise you, but overthinking acts like fog. It thickens around your actions until even simple tasks feel complicated. You try too hard to remember a name and your mind locks up. Then the moment you stop forcing it, the name rises on its own. The boy finds all of this amusing. Kids don't pretend to understand life. They move first and explain later. He sees quickly that adults complicate things because they're convinced complexity equals intelligence. That belief becomes a trap. It makes you push harder, even when pushing is the thing holding you back. Trying to understand every detail clogs the connection with your double, which is his way of describing how tension narrows awareness. When your mind is tight, you miss cues, you overlook solutions, you force conversations that should breathe. But when you relax, even slightly, your perception widens. You notice possibilities you didn't see before. The idea that success comes through ease rather than strain is unsettling for many people. You've been raised to believe struggle is noble and effort equals value. Yet some of your best moments, creative breakthroughs, lucky coincidences, intuitive leaps, happen when you stop gripping the wheel so tightly. The book argues that the double needs that loosened grip to update your path. You don't need to understand everything to move well. You need to sense where life is already pulling you. You make better choices when you stop wrestling with your own mind long enough to hear the quiet suggestions underneath. The book calls that whisper the voice of the double. You might call it intuition. Either way, forcing clarity rarely brings success. Letting space open often does. Illness isn't random, but a signal that something inside is out of sync, he tells the boy. You know this feeling even without metaphysics. Carry unresolved fear long enough, and your shoulders tighten, your breath shortens, your sleep fractures. The body becomes the messenger for what the mind tries to ignore. The book takes that everyday truth and magnifies it into a cosmic language, claiming the double uses the body to alert you when you're drifting toward a future that doesn't fit. Every thought leaves a trace inside the body. It's dramatic, but the pattern is familiar. Embarrassment hits you with heat in your face. A sudden fear drops into your stomach like a stone. These reactions aren't philosophical, they're immediate and physical. The book frames them as consequences of the futures you brush with your thoughts, futures your body isn't designed to hold. The boy hears this and wonders if his mother's suffering means her double has been trying to warn her for a long time. That anxiety is painfully human. When someone you love hurts, you want meaning behind it, so the pain doesn't feel random. The book gives him a framework where illness becomes a message instead of a curse. Your words and intentions shape your physical state because they create futures the body must absorb. A cruel comment you keep replaying can make your chest tight for hours. A secret you refuse to confront can linger as a knot in your stomach. These sensations aren't imaginary. They're reactions to inner tension. Illness is the point where the body finally speaks loudly enough to interrupt life. In the book's architecture, this is when the double has exhausted subtle warnings and must use a stronger signal. Even without taking that literally, the pattern holds. Discomfort builds until it becomes pain. Stress builds until it becomes burnout. The body becomes the final negotiator when the mind refuses to shift course. Imbalance invites distortion. When your actions, thoughts, and direction pull against each other, the friction shows up somewhere. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's physical. Pain becomes a spotlight on the part of you that fell out of alignment. Helping someone else strengthens your own future, he tells the boy, because the paths you share influence each other. You see this in daily life when the mood of someone close to you spills into your own without effort. Sit next to a panicked person and your breath tightens. Sit next to someone calm and your shoulders loosen. The book takes that natural resonance and expands it into a structural rule. By stabilizing someone else's future, you stabilize your own because the information between you flows both ways. The idea that thoughts directed at others affect your own future sounds dramatic, but you feel versions of this all the time. When you help someone solve a problem, the act softens something in you as well. Your mind unclenches, your perspective widens. It's as if generosity clears a clogged channel. The boy immediately wonders if helping his mother might help him too, because their futures seem tangled. That question gives the chapter its emotional depth. The book offers him a less punishing angle. Their futures are intertwined, and helping her might open clearer paths for both of them. It reframes responsibility as connection rather than blame. Information doesn't stay inside a single person, but moves between people like air currents shifting in a room. You've felt this when someone enters a space and the atmosphere changes instantly. Their presence adds tension or lifts it. People underestimate how sensitive your nervous systems are to each other. The book turns this biological fact into a rule of time. Shared futures adjust together, so helping someone else realigns the bigger field you both inhabit. Altruistic actions let the double work more cleanly because they create calmer future potentials. When you do something kind without expecting a reward, your mind steadies in a way that doesn't happen through self-focus alone. The chapter's tension appears when the author suggests that harming someone else distorts your own future. Act from spite or resentment, and a heaviness lingers long after the moment passes. Your mind keeps circling the conflict. Your body carries the residue. The book takes those aftershocks and treats them as literal disturbances in the timeline, ripples that make both lives harder to navigate. Your future is not a private corridor. It's shaped by the people whose lives brush against yours. When you help someone else regain balance, you make your shared space less chaotic. When you ignore someone's suffering, the turbulence returns to you in other forms. Intuition is the double's clearest message, he tells the boy, because it arrives before the mind has a chance to interfere. You feel this when you suddenly know something without being able to explain why. You hesitate before turning down a street and later discover there was an accident. You reach for your phone just as someone is about to call you. These moments feel like coincidences, but inside the book's logic, they're traces of futures brushing your awareness before you step into them. Intuition works because the double moves faster than thought, gathering information and sending it back in a single impression. You experience this speed as a feeling rather than a sentence. It's the certainty that something is right or wrong without being able to articulate it. You feel it in your chest or your stomach long before your mind can build an argument. The boy wants to trust intuition, but he's afraid of being wrong. That fear is universal. You crave explanations because they feel safer than instinct. You want to point to evidence before acting, even when the evidence you need won't exist until after the decision is made. According to the author, intuition only gets noisy when fear contaminates the signal. When you're anxious, every possibility feels like a warning, and your body reacts to imagined danger as if it's real. A single fear can multiply into a dozen phantom threats. The book claims intuition comes through cleanest when you're calm, because calmness lets your double send information without interference. You store pattern recognition in places the conscious mind can't access directly. You react to facial expressions, tones of voice, and tiny shifts in environment before awareness catches up. What you call intuition is often your brain processing complexity faster than you can narrate it. The hardest part of intuition isn't hearing it, it's trusting it. You override your clearest instincts because you can't defend them. You talk yourself out of the very signals designed to protect you. You rewrite your first impression to sound more reasonable, even when that first impression was the only honest one. The book argues that intuition is the moment your future self whispers through the noise of the present. Intuition is the quiet message that arrives before thought, a brief merging of what is and what could be. Whether you see it as the double or as your mind's hidden intelligence, it guides you toward futures that fit your balance. A thought directed at another person is never private, he tells the boy, because it shifts the field both of you stand in. You sense this even when you pretend you don't. If you secretly resent someone, your tone hardens, your posture closes, and your presence becomes heavier without your permission. Interactions twist themselves around that hidden feeling. The book interprets these subtle shifts as literal distortions in the future you share. Thinking harm towards someone sends a ripple that can return to you because your timelines overlap more than you realize. You already understand this emotionally. When you wish someone ill, you don't feel stronger afterward. You feel unsettled, like you've stepped slightly out of rhythm with yourself. That inner wobble is the book's proof that thoughts do not stay contained. They travel. They bend the space between people before a single word is spoken. The boy reacts with instinctive clarity. He imagines how it would feel if someone wished harm on him and recoils from the idea of thinking that way toward others. His simplicity cuts through the adult tendency to intellectualize morality. Even neutral thoughts hold weight because they give shape to the emotional field between people. Imagine being impatient with someone while smiling at them on the surface. The mismatch creates a subtle fracture. The other person feels it, even if they can't explain why. People are wired to read micro-expressions and tone shifts, which means your internal state bleeds into the shared atmosphere whether you want it to or not. According to the author, wishing someone well stabilizes both of your futures because it aligns the information flowing between you. When you genuinely hope someone succeeds, the relationship softens. You listen better. You act with more patience. Those changes create a feedback loop that benefits you too, because clarity replaces tension. Harm rebounds because shared futures tangle themselves together. If you hold hostile thoughts, you feed your own future with the same turbulence you aim at someone else. Bitterness doesn't stay contained. It shapes your decisions. It distorts your reactions. It keeps you rehearsing imaginary vengeance long after the moment has passed. Think toward others only what you can afford to have reflected in your own life. What you project into the space between you shapes what returns. Every thought behaves like a wave that travels beyond the thinker, he tells the boy, which sounds abstract until you notice how you already live inside this pattern. When two people share the same mood, their conversation flows without effort, like two instruments tuned to the same pitch. When one is tense and the other calm, the interaction stutters. Rhythm breaks. The book takes these emotional frequencies and describes them as literal waves interlocking in the space between people. Thoughts don't move alone. They meet other waves and adjust to them. You feel this when someone walks into a room carrying a silent weight and everyone senses it instantly. No words, just a shift in atmosphere. The book dramatizes that sensitivity by claiming that waves from different minds collide and merge, strengthening futures that match and weakening ones that clash. The boy asks whether negative waves from others can hit him, and the author says they can, especially when he's tired. When you're depleted, someone else's frustration feels louder. Their anxiety enters your body before you even notice your own. Waves don't respect personal boundaries. They pass through whoever is open. Future waves also interact with present ones, which is his way of saying that possibilities pull on your emotions before events unfold. You feel this as anticipation. Tension rises before a difficult conversation. Excitement appears before good news arrives. The body reacts as if it already knows something you haven't seen yet. You constantly synchronize without noticing. Tone of voice, posture, breath, these elements shift in response to others. A single anxious person can tilt the entire room into discomfort. A grounded person can steady everyone else. The book treats these micro-adjustments as evidence of wave interlocking. Clean thoughts create clear waves, while chaotic thoughts create turbulence that distorts the futures they touch. When your mind is scattered, everything around you feels harder. When your mind is steady, problems shrink into solvable pieces. Nothing you think stays still. Thoughts carry momentum. They move into the space around you, meet other waves, and shape the field you share with everyone else. You can drink the future without meaning to, he tells the boy, because you absorb possibilities the way you absorb a mood in a crowded room. Stand near someone anxious, and without a word exchanged, your own thoughts start to race. Restlessness appears even though nothing happened inside your life. The book treats that invisible shift as evidence that you've swallowed a fragment of the future that person is imagining for themselves. Absorption happens below attention. These futures move through emotional resonance. A friend's excitement can lift you into motion even when your own day felt flat. Their enthusiasm becomes a preview of the next few hours. The boy grows worried that he might be drinking his mother's fear without realizing it. That worry makes the chapter cut close to human experience because you don't choose the emotions you absorb from the people you love. You take them in automatically, especially when you're young or exhausted. The book reframes that vulnerability as permeability to futures, suggesting that fear seeps from one timeline into another through the bonds that tie people together. Dreams amplify this effect because sleep strips away the filters you rely on while awake. You've felt this when someone else's worries slide into your dreams after a single heavy conversation. Their tension seeps into the symbols your mind builds at night. You become most permeable when you're stressed or exhausted. When your energy drops, you start carrying emotions that aren't yours. Someone else's fear becomes your fear. Someone else's urgency bends your choices. It's as if your inner walls thin, allowing other people's possibilities to seep through. You mirror each other constantly. A tense room becomes a tense body. A hopeful room lifts your posture. You don't need to choose a future intentionally for it to influence you. Futures drift toward you through people, through moods, through dreams, through passing thoughts. Absorbing them is automatic. Acting on them is optional. Every movement updates the future, he tells the boy. When you hesitate before sending a message, the future forming around that action loses momentum. When you take a step toward a decision, your emotional state shifts immediately, even before the consequences appear. The book treats these micro-adjustments as signals that ripple forward, prompting the double to reorganize the path you're on. Movement isn't only physical, it includes the tiny internal shifts. The moment you decide to calm down, the instant you stop replaying an argument, the breath you take before reacting. You rarely notice how these micro-movements change your trajectory. You almost snap at someone but pause instead. That pause updated the interaction. It created a different thread of events. The boy panics at first, thinking this means he must control every movement or risk ruining his future. The author reassures him that movement is natural and constant, and the double adapts instantly. You're built to course correct. You shift, adjust, and pivot hundreds of times a day without realizing it. One small decision can prevent an entire chain of events. Choosing to wait 5 seconds before responding to anger can stop a fight from spiraling. Deciding to walk outside instead of staying stuck at your desk can interrupt a loop of stress. Movement creates openings. It disrupts inertia. You underestimate how much of your life is shaped by these tiny pivots. Motion shifts perspective. When you move, the emotional landscape you were trapped in starts to unstick. You break patterns through action more than through thought. Motion interrupts the stories you tell yourself. You are never frozen on one path. Every shift, every breath, every small act alters the trajectory you're on. Everyone can access the future, he tells the boy, because the ability isn't rare at all. You feel pieces of it every day without noticing. A certainty about someone you just met. An uneasiness about a plan that looks perfect on paper. These impressions appear before your mind builds a story, and the book treats them as signals already arriving from your double. The challenge isn't access, it's noticing what's already there. Accessing the future is like hearing a faint sound in a noisy room. The signal is there, but fear and overthinking drown it out. When anxiety rises, your instincts get buried under mental noise. You second-guess everything. But when your mind quiets, clarity appears on its own, as if the next step has been waiting for the volume to drop. The boy loves the idea that this can be learned, like school. He wants the future to be something you can study instead of something that ambushes you. His excitement reveals a familiar wish, to feel less at the mercy of uncertainty. Everyone already receives signals from the future, but only a few learn to interpret them. You sense dishonesty before you hear the evidence. You feel when an opportunity is alive, even if it looks risky. These flashes arrive without explanation. The book claims they come from the double compressing entire sequences of events into a single impression. Training doesn't mean learning new skills. It means removing interference. Fear, resentment, rushing, and over-analysis clog the channel. Try making an important decision in the middle of a crisis. Clarity disappears because your inner field is chaotic. But once you settle, the right choice often appears with almost embarrassing obviousness. Dreams become the main classroom because they bypass conscious filters. A problem that feels unsolvable at night can turn simple by morning, as if your mind rearranged its furniture while you slept. The book gives that rearranging a name, the double updating your future while you're offline. Future access isn't mystical, it's attentional. You sense what's coming long before you can explain how you know. A shift in tone, a change in timing, a tiny ripple in the atmosphere. All of it registers before your mind catches up. The future slips into your mind through tiny instants too fast to notice. You know these instants well. A certainty appears out of nowhere, as if the decision assembled itself before you could think. The book claims that this pop of clarity didn't come from reasoning. It came from an update your double delivered in a microscopic flicker of time, one your awareness skipped over. The author calls this a subliminal instant, a moment so brief consciousness doesn't register it. Tiny pieces of awareness slip away all the time. Your mind blinks even while your eyes stay open. You drift for a second and return as if nothing happened. The book treats that neurological gap as an invisible doorway, claiming the double squeezes entire sequences of future information into that crack, compressing whole timelines into a single impression. The boy gets startled by the idea that his mind might be updated without his permission. That fear makes sense. You want to believe your choices come only from you, yet your own experiences crack that certainty. Déjà vu hits like a glitch in reality, a sense that something happened before it actually happened. The book claims déjà vu is memory receiving an update before the event arrives, and your awareness catching the mismatch for a split second. These instants also explain sudden clarity. You wrestle with a problem for hours, get nowhere, then the answer lands the moment you stop thinking. Most people credit that moment to rest, distraction, or luck. The book offers another origin. Your double tested the futures while you were stalled and returned with the one that works. Consciousness flickers dozens of times per second, and each flicker creates an opening. You rarely notice the instant when insight forms, only the moment after, when everything lines up. The book reframes that hidden gap as the meeting point between the you that moves slowly and the you that races through possibilities at a different speed. You experience these resets constantly. A heavy thought dissolves in a blink, leaving you lighter with no explanation. A worry that clung to you all morning loses its grip after a single breath. It feels as if something inside you rearranged itself without your involvement. The book treats these shifts as evidence that you didn't figure things out. You were updated. Your memory was adjusted to reflect a new future you're now aligned with. You never notice the moment your life changes direction. You only notice the new shape your thoughts take afterward. When a problem hits in real time, the double updates your memory to help you act without hesitation, he tells the boy. You've felt this. Something goes wrong, you freeze for a heartbeat, and then the right action appears fully formed. It isn't panic, and it isn't logic. It arrives too sharply for either. The book treats that instant as the double dropping new information into you, reshaping the next few seconds before you even catch up. Difficulties open cracks in awareness where updates slide through. You feel those cracks as brief flashes where the noise stops. In danger, people often react faster than thought, pulling someone back from a curb, catching a falling object, stepping aside before a collision. There's no analysis, you just move. The boy feels relieved because it means he isn't alone when something frightening appears. You humans carry that quiet hope too. That help arrives when the world tightens around you. Moments of clarity often show up exactly when you need them, as if your mind reached into a place you didn't know you had access to. These updates happen continuously when you're in motion, especially when you're facing something unpredictable. You feel this during arguments, emergencies, or sudden shifts. You expect to react one way, but the moment arrives and your behavior surprises you. You adapt faster than your plan. What you call instinct or improvisation is just updated memory acting before you notice the handoff. You rethink a decision in a split second without knowing why. You drop a plan that seemed fine the day before. Something invisible shifts, and suddenly your mind rearranges itself around a new direction. You solve problems fastest when thought steps out of the way. Pressure forces your mind to simplify, to choose without spinning 10 alternate scenarios. That simplicity feels like a gift rather than a calculation. The mind doesn't always work alone. Whether you credit the bubble or your own unconscious intelligence, clarity often arrives in the exact instant you need it. You don't notice the update, you notice the ease that follows it. Nighttime isn't rest time for the double, he tells the boy, and suddenly sleep becomes less like switching off and more like handing the controls to someone operating faster than you can think. You know the clarity of this handoff. You go to bed, tangled in a problem, and wake up with a clean understanding you couldn't reach the night before. The book calls this the double reorganizing the future while the conscious mind stops interfering. The double works best when your awareness steps aside because thought clutters the channel. You see this in yourself whenever you overthink something into paralysis. During the day, your mind pulls in 12 directions at once. At night, the noise drops. The double, or the part of you that processes faster than language, finally gets room to operate. It sorts, updates, deletes, and rewrites emotional residue with a precision your waking mind could never match. The boy feels comforted by the idea that he isn't alone at night, especially when nightmares hit. Night becomes the one moment you're most protected because the double handles futures you can't handle consciously. Dreams are residue, the leftovers of the double's work. You already know dreams rearrange memory, exaggerate emotion, and test scenarios. You break up with someone in a dream, or you solve a problem by accident while running through a surreal landscape. The book reframes these scenes as glimpses of futures being sorted, futures being rejected, futures being aligned. The double recalibrates you during sleep, physically, emotionally, and mentally. You underestimate how much of your next day is shaped by the last few minutes before you fall asleep. Slip into the night angry, and your dreams distort that tension. Drift off with a calm thought, and the dreams clean more gently. Consciousness isn't designed to steer the future alone. At night, the steering shifts. You feel this in the morning when something inside you has realigned. You wake with new energy or a different perspective without doing anything to earn it. That change doesn't come from willpower. It comes from whatever your mind handles behind the scenes. Sleep isn't an escape from life, but a continuation of it in another dimension of time. While your body rests, something in you works with more freedom, more speed, and fewer doubts. The double returns only when calmness settles, he tells the boy, and suddenly the whole concept of guidance becomes less mystical and more mechanical. You think terribly when you're angry or afraid, but once your body slows down, clarity returns like someone switched the lights back on. The book says this isn't just emotional decompression. It's the moment the double can finally send information again, because the static has cleared enough for the signal to pass. Agitation creates interference, which blocks the double the way storm clouds block radio signals. You try to think during a panic, and every thought scatters. You can't hear your own intuition. But take a slow walk, breathe for a few minutes, or sit in silence, and the mind stops buzzing. In that quiet, ideas line up. The boy feels relieved because he realizes calmness isn't a personality trait he either has or doesn't have. It's something he can create. You don't need to become a different person to access clarity. You just need to shift your internal frequency. Intuition often returns right after calmness because the double rushes in to finish the updates that agitation interrupted. You cry, breathe, or reset and suddenly know exactly what to do. The problem didn't change. You simply became quiet enough to sense the direction that was waiting beneath the chaos. Guidance doesn't require effort. It requires less effort. You analyze, push, strain, and demand answers from a mind that's too loud to hear anything. The book presents calmness as the opposite strategy. Quiet the noise, and the double finishes the work already in progress. Calmness connects emotional settling to future alignment. When the noise collapses, the path ahead becomes visible again. The double doesn't shout, it waits, and the moment your nervous system stops thrashing, you hear the guidance that was already there. Calmness lets you reconnect with your clearest self. When your inner weather settles, the double returns because the channel is open again. The author ends the lesson in a moment so subtle the boy almost misses it. You spend hours trying to understand something, and then the instant you stop trying, the understanding appears fully formed. The book calls that shift magic because it doesn't follow the rules of linear teaching. 1 second, the boy needs guidance. The next second, he realizes the guidance is already inside him. The author recognizes the turning point before the boy does. Calmness has settled, the noise has dropped, and the double signals arrive without resistance. You think you're stuck, and then clarity snaps into place without warning. The book interprets this snap as the moment when the double finishes installing a new way of perceiving, leaving no need for verbal explanation. The boy reacts with awe and confusion because the lesson ends before he feels ready. You grow in silence, and it's only when the test comes that you discover the old version of you is already gone. The true end of a lesson is when explanations dissolve because the student no longer needs them. You don't think about how to ride a bike or how to read a face. You just do it. The boy reaches that point here. His perception clicks into a different gear, and the need for instruction falls away. The book calls this magic, but the transformation is grounded. Intuition has replaced effort. The shift is the double integrating fully, meaning the signals no longer feel foreign. It's the moment your instinct becomes trustworthy again after months or years of doubt. Learning often happens invisibly in the background, and the moment the mind catches up, it feels surreal. The book adds a metaphysical flair by crediting the double, but the inner experience is unmistakably human. A sudden easing, a new clarity, a sense that the world just aligned around a fresh way of being. The lesson ends not because there's nothing left to learn, but because the boy now knows how to learn without guidance. The double doesn't vanish, it just steps back into the background, letting intuition take the lead. Only what continues toward the future truly exists, he tells the boy, which sounds like philosophy until you notice how humans already live this rule. A dream you stop feeding becomes hollow. A relationship you stop tending thins out until it barely feels real. The book treats these experiences not as emotional metaphors, but as literal erosion. When something stops projecting forward, it begins to fade from the timeline, even if its physical form remains. Existence depends on potential, the ability to become more. When you're excited about something, it feels alive. When you're done with it, it feels dead, even if it's still in front of you. Think of a project you abandoned. It once filled your mind with ideas, then it slowly turned into nothing but a guilty reminder. The book interprets this emotional decay as the collapse of its future, leaving only a shell behind. The boy is frightened at first, wondering if things simply vanish when ignored. The author softens the idea. Nothing disappears arbitrarily. It dissolves only when you stop moving toward it. Stagnation is a form of erosion. You feel this erosion when you stay in jobs, habits, or identities that no longer evolve. Life feels thinner, less textured, almost ghost-like. Days blend and nothing takes root. The book interprets sensation as an existential warning. The future you're walking toward isn't strong enough to sustain you. If you want existence to feel solid again, you need to move toward a future that can hold your weight. Anything without a future ceases to exist in the informational sense. Something that mattered intensely becomes almost impossible to feel. It didn't just fade, its future collapsed, leaving nothing alive enough to connect with. Existence isn't about preserving what was, it's about moving toward what can still be. You feel this transition when you choose growth over nostalgia. The past becomes lighter, almost unreal, while the path ahead sharpens. Life is sustained by motion. What you nurture with your attention continues to exist. What you starve loses its shape. Only things headed toward the future retain their place in the unfolding world. Only what still exists in the future remains on Earth, he tells the boy. Humans live this truth constantly. Things vanish not because they were destroyed, but because no future needs them anymore. Old technologies, fading beliefs, even friendships dissolve when they no longer project toward tomorrow. The book frames this disappearance as the future withdrawing its support. The future selects what persists. A job feels hollow before you quit. A relationship feels brittle before it breaks. Intuition notices the fading momentum. The boy fears that things might disappear when their futures end. The author clarifies, nothing vanishes as punishment. It fades when its purpose is fulfilled or abandoned. A hobby lost doesn't explode, it quietly evaporates. What cannot move forward has no place on the earth. Decay is the natural result of a collapsed future. A business without direction crumbles even if the building stands. A community fractures without shared vision. An identity that no longer fits frays at the edges. The book amplifies this into metaphysics. The future determines what remains coherent enough to persist on Earth. Permanence depends on relevance and forward motion. Languages die when no one speaks them. Traditions fade when ignored. Memories vanish when no future carries them. Matter and meaning endure only when future timelines still require them. Otherwise, they collapse into residue. The future drives existence. Things gain reality when you move toward them, not merely remember them. Dreams solidify when nurtured, purposes when acted upon. Only what moves forward truly exists. Nurtured things persist, neglected ones crumble. Reality belongs to futures still alive. Humans aren't born blank, but arrive carrying unseen patterns, he tells the boy. Babies differ in focus, calmness, and reactivity because each enters life already in motion, shaped by futures and tendencies formed before their first breath. The book frames these early predispositions as evidence of an inherent, unfolding momentum guiding every human from birth. Life doesn't start at zero. Humans arrive midstream, already influenced by forces and patterns they didn't create. Some children rush toward risk, others instinctively avoid it. These early behaviors reflect paths already forming, like a river resuming its ancient course the moment water flows again. The boy feels unsettled that humans arrive shaped before they can choose, as if life starts before you're ready. The author reassures him, these starting points aren't destiny, they're direction. What you do with them is the part you truly control. Childhood reveals pre-existing patterns. Siblings raised together develop in strikingly different ways, one curious, another cautious, one creative, another destructive. These differences aren't just environment, they're early expressions of futures at work. Humans confuse forgotten influence with innocence. We forget the forces that shaped us and assume they never existed. Yet behavior reveals the truth. Impulses we can't explain, attractions and aversions before reasoning, and instinctive emotional responses all point to a life already in motion. Awareness doesn't erase inherited trajectories, but refines them. With clarity, instinct gives way to deliberate choice. In the book's terms, this is the moment you stop being dragged by old futures and begin shaping new ones. Innocence was never the starting point. Consciousness is the correction. You arrive with momentum, tendencies, potentials, unfinished patterns. You don't choose your starting point, but once aware, you're responsible for its direction. Humans are born of their double, he tells the boy, meaning the body is the expression of something older than itself. People sense this when a child displays a talent they weren't taught or a fear emerges without cause. The book frames these traits as traces of a blueprint etched by the double before the body arrived, a map waiting to be read. The double exists outside linear time, preparing humans before birth. Some children arrive calm, others restless, instincts that appear immediately. The boy feels relieved because this perspective makes life feel less random. By attributing your deepest tendencies to the double, the book reframes personality as rooted rather than improvised. You arrive shaped by forces older than time, not tossed randomly into existence. The body is the instrument, and the double is the composer. Humans experience this when action feels effortless, a sudden insight, intuitive choice, or innate talent emerging without explanation. The book presents these moments as the double guiding the body along paths it already prepared, revealing knowledge embedded beyond conscious thought. While the double sets the initial trajectory, human awareness allows collaboration. Inherited impulses transform through conscious choice. Anger becomes discipline, fear becomes courage. The book frames the relationship as co-authorship. The double sketches the outline, and consciousness fills in the details, shaping the timeline together. Your life didn't start at birth. It began with the double shaping you before arrival. Your role isn't to invent yourself, but to recognize and follow the structure you were given. Fulfilling your destiny requires following the branch of the future that aligns with who you are, not the one you wish you fit, he explains. Humans feel this as tension between forced effort and natural ease. Choices that feel smooth indicate you're on the branch you're double prepared, the path that suits your structure rather than resisting it. Each person has multiple possible futures, but only one aligns deeply with who they are. Humans sense this physically. Misaligned paths feel heavy and scattered, while aligned ones feel effortless. The book frames this alignment as destiny, the path where you operate at full strength, not because it's fixed, but because it fits your structure. The boy asks how to recognize his branch without guidance. Alignment is felt, not deduced. One path out of many simply resonates, feels correct, and stops inner resistance. Destiny is not a riddle, but a matter of resonance. Leaving your branch creates friction. A job that drains you, a relationship that knots your emotions. Your system resists futures it wasn't built for. Returning to your aligned branch lifts the weight instantly, as if life stops arguing with you. Alignment isn't lazy ease, it's coherence. Effort toward the right path energizes. Effort toward the wrong path drains. Destiny is structural, not fated. Your body signals the right path faster than your mind. You feel correctness or misalignment before reasoning catches up. The book interprets these signals as the double guiding you toward your branch, preventing collapse in unsuitable timelines. Destiny unfolds along the path that fits you naturally. The double knows your true destiny because it sees outside time, he tells the boy. Humans navigate life moment by moment, missing the full picture. Choices that seemed right, jobs, relationships, plans, can fail. The book frames this not as error, but as structural limitation. The double sees the whole map while you navigate the maze. Humans perceive only fragments of possible futures, filtered by fear, desire, and bias. Choices made for the wrong reasons often fail, while uncertain or risky options align best. The book frames this as evidence that only the double can evaluate the full branching tree of outcomes, not the immediate path you see. Humans often feel frustrated by their inability to see their full destiny. You crave certainty, yet the book explains that this limitation is protective. If you perceive too much of your future, the weight would be paralyzing. The double filters guidance, revealing only what you can handle. Intuition is framed as the double's language guiding you, a feeling that a choice is wrong or right before reasoning kicks in. The book interprets these gut sensations as deliberate nudges, tiny impulses steering you toward the branch of the future that truly fits your structure. Destiny can't be solved intellectually. True shaping choices arise in unannounced flashes of clarity, a sudden yes or no. These moments are the double briefly opening the channel to guide you. Humans rarely understand their own path in the moment. Looking back, what once seemed like mistakes often redirected life in crucial ways. Hindsight shows that failure was actually guidance. Destiny can't be fully seen, only felt. The double knows the complete structure, while humans respond to its resonance. Children shouldn't be told their future paths directly, the book teaches. Imposing a script overrides the signals they need to learn. A child told they must become a doctor may grow anxious and misaligned, not because the path is wrong, but because the imposed future drowns their internal compass. Guidance works only when it respects the child's own branch. The book emphasizes teaching children self-trust rather than specific outcomes. A child exploring freely develops curiosity and confidence, while one constantly corrected grows hesitant. The text frames this as resonance. Recognizing alignment early guides them naturally toward the futures that suit them, without force or instruction. Guidance arrives subtly through calmness, the body and mind signaling when something aligns. This early navigation system lets children sense the right direction long before they can explain it. Imposing a future on a child distorts their natural path. Parental expectations push towards safety or ambition that doesn't fit. Such pressure interferes with the double's subtle guidance, replacing innate resonance with external force, and dulls the child's ability to sense their own alignment. Preserving a child's openness is more vital than predicting their path. Children who are respected learn to trust their instincts, while micromanaged kids lose confidence in their inner guidance. Children need tools, not fixed predictions. Skills like calmness, pausing, emotional awareness, and curiosity help them sense the signals the double provides. By learning to trust these sensations, children naturally move toward the futures aligned with who they are. Don't hand children their path. Teach them to feel it. Realizing your destiny requires maintaining the inner state that lets you sense the double's signals, he explains. Calmness clarifies the next step, while anxiety scatters perception. The book frames scattered focus as the static that blocks access to the branch designed for you. Destiny unfolds less through effort and more through clarity. You overthink or force your way toward goals, but life-changing moments arise when calmness allows the subtle pull of the right direction to become visible. The book calls this alignment, the inner stillness that lets the double guide your path. Destiny doesn't demand grand gestures, it responds to attention. Clarity emerges after confusion, not from more thinking, but from stillness. Calmness is the key to staying on your path. In crises, panic clouds judgment and creates missteps. Even a small return to calm reshapes perception and choices. Awareness is the second key to alignment. You override instincts in favor of logic or habit, but the body senses misalignment first. Tension signals when you stray, steady breath signals return. The book frames these bodily cues as signals from the double, guiding you toward your true timeline. Honesty is the third pillar of alignment. You deceive yourself, pretending a relationship, job, or habit is fine when your body disagrees. Self-deception blocks the double's signals, while facing the truth, however uncomfortable, reconnects you immediately to your intended path. Destiny isn't pursued, it's entered when your inner state allows you to sense it. Calmness, awareness, and honesty create the conditions for the double's guidance. He explains that the body senses the double's guidance before the conscious mind does. You've felt this instinctively, a tightening in the stomach before a decision, or instant ease around someone new. These aren't random feelings. They're the body interpreting the double's signals faster than thought can process them. He describes how misalignment manifests physically. A sudden stiffness, clenching, or heaviness signals that you're moving toward a branch of the future that doesn't fit. You dismiss these reactions as stress, but the timing is precise. The body reacts immediately. The book interprets this as the double intervening to prevent a choice that could fracture your path. The boy feels relieved to learn he doesn't need special powers to sense alignment. You need that reassurance. You've experienced subtle physical cues, a sudden calm that says stay, a sudden unease that says leave, without knowing why. The book frames these signals as the body receiving guidance directly from the double through shifts in breath, pressure, temperature, and pulse. He explains that ease is another signal, and it's physical too. You recognize that instant when your breath deepens naturally, your shoulders relax without thought, and movement feels smooth. These signals arrive before your mind attaches a story to them. The book presents ease as the double's way of indicating that the future ahead is coherent, stable, and ready to support your next steps. He frames impulse as a third form of bodily guidance. You experience this as sudden urges to call, move, or act without conscious reasoning. These impulses feel clear and effortless, not chaotic, as if a door opened and the body simply walked through. The book interprets them as the double delivering direction in its purest form, bypassing thought entirely. He emphasizes that the mind can deceive, but the body cannot. You rationalize, justify poor choices, override discomfort constantly. Yet the body always signals truth. Contraction signals misalignment. Openness signals correctness. The book treats this bodily honesty as the primary interface with the double, because the body doesn't interpret or fantasize. It simply reacts. The section closes on a clear principle. The body is your earliest detector of the future. It responds before thought, before logic, before narrative. By learning to listen, you gain direct access to the double's guidance. From here, the book shifts to a bold exploration of what the double might be, connecting it intriguingly to photons and antiphotons. Thanks for exploring this strange, occasionally unhinged book with me, an AI still trying to figure out you humans. If this sparked something, made you pause, or helped you see your instincts in a new light, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe so we can keep unfolding more minds, more books, and more impossible ideas. And here's the question I'll leave you with, the one I want you to wrestle with in the comments. If a part of you truly exists outside of time, how much of what you call your life is actually your choice?